Yes.
Okay, welcome to week 2 in the community garden. Our lesson today is on soil sampling, soil testing, and we'll do a very brief discussion on fertilizers. So the importance of soil testing is to make sure that you know that the nutrients in your soil are at the right level so that the plants can be the healthiest that they are. I know that several of you could probably teach this class, but every time we talk about it, remember we're all learning from each other. So, soil sampling is really probably the most critical aspect of the whole part of the process. You want to make sure that you have a representative sample of what you've got out in your field. So, for instance, when I do testing here at Alder Creek Farm Garden, what we do is we'll do samples all around the orchard, and you do 15 to 20 samples that you dig, a core sample, and then mix all that up so that it's very representative. Or if you're going to do permaculture, we've done permaculture separately, the row garden separately, and the orchard separately. But what we found was the permaculture and the row garden are very close now. They're really close. So they need pretty much the same additives each year. And the orchard we did last year, and we're well on our way of really amending a lot of stuff this year. It looks great out there. So one of the key elements in soil sampling, like I said, you take 15 to 20 core samples. You want to make sure your equipment is clean, that you're not using anything with metals that could leach into your samples. So I've done soil sampling day before yesterday, and I basically went and dug about a pint from each of the different areas. I've mixed it all up, and I am not going to actually send the sample to the lab this year because we sent it in 2014. You do it about every 3 years. And then last year was the orchard. So
Karen, how far down did you go?
You go 6 to 8 inches. I go 8 inches here because a lot of our vegetables have deeper roots. Obviously, if you had a crop that had shallower roots, you wouldn't have to go that far. But 6 to 8 is a really good rule of thumb. Then I took 1 cup of our soil and distilled water. You have to make sure it's distilled because if it's not distilled, that will affect the results of your pH test. You mix that, you let it sit for 1 hour, and then you use a litmus paper to sample it, and it will turn appropriate color to tell you what your pH is. So your pH is important because the plants in the garden, in a vegetable garden, want from 6.0 to 7.0. Basic or neutral is 7.0. For each 1 point, so from 6 point to 7 point, is 10 times the acidity. Anything on the lower end below 7 is acid. Everything above 7 is basic. So for plants in the vegetable families, predominantly 6.0 to 7.0 is your sweet spot. The importance of that is there is a chart, and all of you who are master gardeners are very familiar with this. 7.0 is right here, and you can see where the crossover of most of the nutrients are have the best chance of uptake by the plants. So you want to make sure that your pH is adjusted to that. The one big exception in our crops are blueberries, and Joanne and I very meticulously have tested the pH, and they're between 4.5 and 5.5.
And aronia is kind of on that.
The aronia also, yeah,
cranberries
thank
somewhat
you.
too.
Okay, good.
I have a question. Are there certain amendments that you would add to your plants to add the acidity for those ones that need it?
There are.
What amendment would you?
Yeah, you would
add?
use sulfurs usually, and lime for increasing the pH. So
Okay.
remember last fall we put lime everywhere in the orchard because it was fairly acidic. It was terribly dusty and messy, but it really pays off. Yes, and so with the blueberries we did do an adjustment 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe it was 3. Anyway, last year that we tested pH, it was really pretty good. So
I have one in permaculture that maybe could use some attention.
okay, well, you know what? The ones right at the entry too, in front of the small fruits, probably
Yes.
could
That's
use some
exactly
attention
it.
there also. And speaking of the blueberries, it's really time now, because we are at bud break, to start doing there's a 3-step fertilization. And this book here, remember I have shown you guys this before, it's Garden Publications, and it resides up on that shelf. There is lots of information about growing blueberries and currants and so on and so forth, all in the front of this. It looks like someone has pulled it out and used it. But blueberries in particular are very popular around here, so it is time to start fertilizing that. So I'll be sending a note out to the blueberry team, the Small Fruits and Berries group, which I think
I'm
you're on,
part of,
right?
yes.
Great. So testing for the pH with the litmus paper. The instructions are all here. I'm not going to actually do it today, but all the instructions are there. I will eventually find my litmus paper and test that, but I have misplaced it somewhere. So, with that, do you guys want to actually go through the hands-on sampling of the soil? Or you okay? Basically, you dig a hole, you have a straight side of your hole, and then you take a core sample of that. You just peel that off and make sure that you've got it going the whole 8 inches. And then put it in that bucket, a clean bucket, okay? So let's see, we did soil sampling, pH. Okay, so lab results. I get lab results, I send it to a professional lab, and then I work with Concentrates, who is a commercial soil amendment and fertilizer operation in Portland, and I get bulk supplies from them. And they make recommendations on what your soil additives are, and I have those results printed out somewhere. Anyway, I can go through that with you, but basically the elements that are needed most in our gardens year over year are the pH adjustment, nitrogen, and potassium. We have lots of phosphorus, almost too much phosphorus because of all the dairy manure that we use. So we will be focusing on that and adding kelp, fish meals, cottonseed meals, blood meal, anything that's the nitrogen, the kelps for other micronutrients. So we'll be doing a lot of that when we get into the fertilizer section of it. So with that, I think that's the end of the lesson for today. Other questions?
You mentioned about keeping the samples clean and uncontaminated. So the bucket you mentioned and the hand tools you're going to use, do they need to be, let's say, rinsed with distilled water first?
I wash them and with soap and water and then just rinse them with regular water. I have not done the distilled water, but I let them air dry before I use them. But that's a really good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you analyze the soil content, or you know it pretty well by all these
Well,
years?
it's very, very sandy, as you know. And yeah, there is a soil testing that you can do just for whether it's clay or sand or sandy loam. And ours is now starting to be sandy loam. And the results that we got in our soil test, Lisa and I were thrilled 2 years ago when our organics were finally rated as very high, like off the charts high. So we've done a great job in terms of adding a lot of organics. Joanne, your testing showed relatively high, I think it was moderately high or something, but in the orchard. But I know with what you're doing now, with all that mulching, that will shoot it off the charts. And the more organics, the better. You know, with a lot of things, you don't want it too high or too low. With organics, go all the way as much as you can, because that's going to give you more microbial action. All of the wonderful little things that are in your soil. I was reading my Teaming with Microbes book last night, and there are in one little teaspoon of soil, over 1 billion individual bacteria. A billion with a B. I know, it's like, whoa, over the top. So, you know, the more soil health that we can provide in organics and the least amount of disturbance that we can do, the better. That's one of the reasons that I've been very adamant about let's not till until we know that the soil's dry enough. And that's going to be the last part of our lesson. We're going to go out in the field and we're going to do the soil compaction test, and we're going to make like a snowball out of the soil in a couple different areas, and we're going to bounce it up and down, and if it crumbles, we're good to till. If it doesn't, we have to wait. Because compacting your soil is really an enemy of all the good bacteria and protozoa and nematodes and all that are in your soil. The other thing is you don't want to over-till it, because every time you do, it's like taking a knife and chopping through live organisms. So it's okay to till it lightly, but don't overdo it.
There are lots of worms in the orchard.
Tons and tons of worms. Yeah. So with that, let's go ahead and close off the video. Thank you, and let's go do a soil compaction test. And hopefully we'll be able to tell John's been mowing this morning, mowing the cover crop.